can go on. All right. Welcome back. Oh, and now it's working again. The sound. I'll tell you what, there must be gremlins. Okay. Yeah, that's working just fine now. And it wasn't before. I wonder why. Well, anyway, we're back, and we're going to finish this first sentence. We're going back to the beginning of the book. And we will find a way to make up for the fact that the last part of that was not audio recorded, but we will find a way to make up for it. The will energy, what is it? Just trying to put the ideas of will and right tension and pure being, essential being, all together. What we see is that will is the energy which produces that which must be. According to the plan of the planetary logos, or higher beings, right tension is a sustained, immovable focus on the emergence of that which must be. And then to hide all difference is due to the irresistible, this is an English word, obtrusion. It means to insert yourself into something so that nobody can help but notice you. It's like breaking in the door. So to hide all difference is due to the irresistible obtrusion of pure being. These thoughts behind us. Okay. Now we go on. For the first time, the expanded consciousness of the initiate can contact Shambhala and the one who rules there. This was what I referred to earlier in the afternoon. For the first time, the focus purpose which brought Sanat Kumara into incarnation makes an impact upon the enlightened brain of the initiate, bringing in the something new and different. We talked about this morning, just to review a little bit. And that something new and different, which we want to have in our life now, is a blinding conviction of unalterable will, carrying all before it, oblivious of time and space, aware only of intensity of direction, and carrying with it two major qualifications or basic recognitions: a sense of essential being which obliterates all the actions and reactions of time and space, and a focused will to good which is so dynamic in its effect that evil disappears. Evil is, after all, only an impelling sense of difference, leading inevitably to separative action. So this we discussed. Well, that was just an insert from a page 175 and 176. We're actually on page 30. Well, now we're going back. Something happened while you were at coffee. We went back. We lost 270 pages. Pages come and go, So, it's so in the Tibetan's book, it doesn't make any difference where you start, really. We can reach all points. We can reach all points from any point. So here we are on page 30, almost page 31. For long, aspirants have noted and been taught the effect of the will upon the astral or emotional body. It is one of the primary and most elementary of the initial tensions. Like I think, Gisli, you said earlier that the mind is the organ of the will. So this is one of the ways that the mind carries the will to the astral body. This is taught upon the probationary path, one of the most elementary initial tensions. Why does he call the effect of the will upon the astral body a tension? Why does he call it a tension or an initial tension? This will help us understand what a point of tension is. Here's the will, and here's what the astral body does. Why is it a tension? The astral body is intending to act in a certain way. And now the will is applied. Why is this application of the will called a tension? Does it create tension? It does. What is the why is there a tension created? It's the sacrifice to use the will on that plane. Yes, indeed. Yes, yes. Did you say a electricity? Well, it's a higher form. It's a positivity versus a negativity. That's for sure. When you suppose you hold a position and the rope is only so long, and here at the other end of the rope, someone is trying to stretch that rope to go in a different direction. Wants to go do what they've always done, but you say, no, you only have so much rope. You cannot go there. So they pull on the rope to do what they used to do. What happens to the rope? What happens to the connection? It stretches, it goes under tension, right? It goes under tension. So when we hold a position saying, this is what we will do, regardless of what we want to do, a tension is created along the line of connection between the place where you hold and the place where you do. And probably, you've had that example if you go fishing, perhaps, The line is out there, it's loose, and all of a sudden the fish bites. What happens on the line? Now, if you let the line go, bzzz, it just goes. The fish goes wherever. Hello, hello. The fish goes wherever. But, welcome, welcome. We're talking about tension. But what happens if you hold the line and you don't let the rod run? Then it locks in, and then the fishing line gets very tight, doesn't it? And there's a tension between your holding and where the fish wants to go, and the fish can't go there. Of course, your line might break. Hopefully not. If it's strong enough, if the connection is strong enough, it won't break. So this effect of the will upon the astral body is one of the initial tensions. Holding something higher and withstanding the counterpull, I called it. And this is taught upon the probationary path. It leads to the purifying and the reorganizing of the entire psychic and emotional life. And the result, and as a result of its destructive action, meaning you hold to a pattern which does not allow the old patterns to repeat themselves. You can't do that anymore, says the will, and those old patterns get destroyed. So he says, here's how we used to talk to the children of the race. He says, if you will only think, if you will only use a little will, if you will only remember that you have a mind. So now, instead of permitting the astral body to do anything we want, we hold to a certain point of mental tension which prevents the customary habits from repeating themselves. Now, I suppose when we're training ourselves, we do that all the time, don't we? We know that we've been doing something which is not useful, and we just stop doing it. We have the will to stop doing it and to start doing something else instead, which will create newer patterns. So this is what we say, he says, we tell this to the children of the race and to beginners upon the path. But I don't think that we've necessarily done this. What do we do? Mind. The same thing, don't we? Only from another and higher perspective. Maybe we can apply this idea of tension all the way up the scale. What do we do when we want to act too much like an individual soul, when the duty of the ashram and of Sanat Kumara calls for something different? The tension is again created, isn't it? It's a kind of a pulling between 2 points of view until one of them wins or the rope snaps. Little by little then the focus of the orientation shifts out of the the focus and the orientation shift out of the astral life and from the emotional level of consciousness into the mental and consequently into the reflection of the world of purpose. So the mental vehicle is a reflection of the world of purpose. It's a reflection, in a way, of the atmic plane, which is a reflection of the monadic level, the world of purpose found in the three worlds. So in a way, the true world of purpose, as far as I'm concerned, is really the monadic plane, but even higher than that, the logoic plane is the world of causes and purpose. When that stage has been somewhat developed, then there follows, upon the path of discipleship and of preparation for initiation, when we can finally behave and our astral body is not running all over the place, there follows the effort to grasp and to understand the higher aspects of the mental process. And the will aspect of the egoic life begins to influence the disciple. And where does this come from? The will aspect of the egoic life, and it comes through which petals does it come? Through the sacrifice petals, and also through the synthesis petals, and also eventually through the jewel in the lotus, which is the reflection of the monad itself. It's really the extension of the monad itself. So the petals of sacrifice unfold, and I would add, through the process of initiation particularly, because at this time, the Christ and Sanat Kumara stimulate the petals of sacrifice. The petals of sacrifice unfold, and the sacred sacrificial aspect of life is revealed in its beauty, purity, simplicity. The sacred sacrificial aspect of life. Something is strange with my something has happened. But I'll be right back. Just the little electronic glitches here and there. Where's the moon? Gemini somewhere? Okay. A good day to have one's communications disrupted. All right. Get rid of this. Gemini, yes, yes, yes. Gemini, yes. Okay. So, going on. So the will aspect of the egoic life. See, how much do you feel yourself driven by the will to sacrifice? I mean, I suppose it's a personal question for everybody. How big a role is sacrifice actually playing in our lives, and are we driven egoically by the will to sacrifice, with the spiritual will working through the sacrifice petals? Is it a factor? Did you say 10% factor? 10%? Do I hear 20? I mean, we're having auctions this afternoon here. We had an auction on the length of the solar system, and I won. Okay. With 150 trillion years. The closest competing bid was 11 billion. Okay, so this whole idea of the beauty of sacrifice, the simplicity of it, the necessity of it, the way that the Christ and Sanat Kumar are trying to urge us toward it, it carries a revolutionizing quality, DK tells us here. So, many of us are perhaps on the path of acquisition. We want to gather the ageless wisdom for ourselves, or because we know it will be useful and wonderful and necessary. But the question is, how many of us are on the path of sacrificial giving? And nobody can answer that for you, of course, or for me. We have to ask ourselves, to what extent are we driven by the sacrificial will? Now, when all three sacrifice petals are unfolded, The petals of synthesis are rapidly unfolding. The jewel in the lotus is being revealed. And the short span between the third and fourth initiation is underway. It drives you right towards the fourth initiation, doesn't it? So this cultivating of sacrificial giving, even though the personality may complain, I see a number of people who are wonderful sacrificers. In their personality, they complain, and then they go ahead and do it anyway. They sacrifice, you see. They give up something less for something greater. And the personality says, ouch, and I'm not happy, and I wanted to do this and that, and my desire nature is being curtailed. But something in them is driving them towards willing sacrifice or acquiescence to the larger will. That is really what sacrifice is, in a way, isn't it? It's not just you say, well, I'm giving up this for that. It's say, in obeying the higher will, the relinquishing of lesser things is required if the greater things are to be obeyed. So I would just suggest that to achieve sacrifice in your life, set a very high goal for yourself that relates to the common good and the welfare of many, and stick to it. And by holding that point of tension, the sacrifice will be inevitable, and you will relinquish what you have to in a decentralized way. So he says, upon the path of initiation here, so sacrifice has a revolutionizing quality. Now, like Elena said the other day, DK doesn't use words without purpose. So the word revolution, in a way, means it can mean like to turn around, to revolve upon your pedestal and face in the other direction. Revolve upon the pedestal of light and face the other way. So this is all about reversing the wheel, isn't it? This is all about increasing the direction toward the spirit rather than going along with the wheel that is spinning into form and matter. So remember, did we read about what the seventh ray did to the man who was standing under the arch? The magnet caused the revolution of the man within the arch. The magnet turned him round until he faced the scene and room unseen before. See, behind him is this wonderful room of beauty, and in front of him is this mess. And he's looking at the mess. And he doesn't know how he's going to straighten out the mess. This is a big seventh ray problem, how to rearrange the room. But the magnet creates for him the possibility, a revolutionizing possibility. It turns him around so he can face the room that he did not see before. Okay. So sacrifice has a revolutionizing effect upon the life. Now, we might say, hey, I'm too old for a revolution now, I just need to go along for a while. I've hit my physical high water mark, and I'd just like to hold the gains that I've made. But DK expects that, as I said, even though we may have hit our physical high water mark, that our consciousness will continue upward. And he says it's very difficult when the body begins to slow down and all of that. It's difficult to continue the upward way of consciousness, even though there may be a declining way of physical strength. Okay, so upon the path of initiation, the monadic will, I like the way he puts this, the monadic will, of which the egoic will is the reflection and the individual self-will the distortion, is gradually transmitted via the antakarana direct to the man on a physical plane. Now, we oftentimes talk about building the antakarana, don't we? And we intend and we visualize and we project. Okay, but what about those impulses which originate from the other side altogether and which maybe are not in our hands? We can send up the invocation, but the answer is going to come according to the will of the higher aspect. So this is what happens on the path of initiation. How would you discriminate monadic will from egoic will? I think with individual self-will, we all have an idea of what that is. I am a person. I want to do certain things according to my desire nature and my mind, you know. But how would you discriminate egoic will from monadic will? How can we define? Well, they are both will, which has to do with the first ray, of course. And of course, the ego is the great second ray center, even though it's the will of a second ray center. And the monad is a great first ray center, and it's the will of a first ray center. Okay, yes. But let's see if we can get the difference of the feel between egoic will and monadic will. How would you say? Yes, Eric. What? Monadic will would be even more sacrificing. Yes, I think so. A lot more, yes. So the quality of sacrificial power is greater, yes. Yes, yes. A difference depending on which level. Well, of course, the egoic will is coming from the higher three levels of the mental plane, and especially when you really begin to use it, you're already a fairly advanced person. So the egoic will is coming specifically from, let's see, I'll try to make this a little smaller. It's coming from this second level of the higher mental plane. That's where the egoic will is coming from, as for people like ourselves who have refocused our causal body on the second level of the higher mental plane. Monadic will, well, it's if the triangle is to be believed, I suppose, monads are focused on different subplanes. Maybe within DK we can find out more about that, but there's a tendency for the third ray monads to focus on the third subplane, the second ray on the second, and the first, I infer, focusing on the first subplane. So this seemed to be the area, the higher three levels for the rays of aspect of monadic will. But we need a qualitative difference here. And I would say, the will of any being, I just want to make a general statement. The nature of the will of any being depends upon the scope of its consciousness. Our individual personal will is what it is because we have that kind of personal consciousness. Now, what is the egoic consciousness compared to the monadic consciousness? And I would just tend to say that the monadic consciousness is far more planetary and even extraplanetary in its scope. And the egoic will, the first phase of it anyway, when we still are pre-fourth initiation, is still much more individual. It's all about expressing the qualities which exist within our egoic nature, those higher virtues, the will to express accumulated virtue. Now, when the causal body is destroyed, the true ego emerges, and where is the true ego found? He actually kind of tells us this. Where is the true ego found? Where do you think? Be brave. Well, the true ego, he says, and I can't even, can you believe this? It's here, but don't tell, I hope I didn't erase it. True ego. E-G-O. It's not here. It's not here, so I'll just have to tell you what it is, wondering how much of the book I have erased. You know, it's sometimes better to just have the CD-ROM that you can't tamper with it. Because if you make a image file of it, you can add or subtract. The true ego is the spiritual triad. I'm just going to see if I can triad. Why don't I learn to spell? Triad ego. True. Okay, look at that. Look at that. Let's see if we can find it. Well, there it is. Then at intervals rare at first, but of increasing frequency, will abstract ideas begin to filter down to be followed in due time by flashes of real illumination or intuition from the spiritual triad or the true threefold ego itself. See how we say ego, that's the soul on the higher mental plane, but that is not. That is the sheath of the soul, the sheath of that type of consciousness. In other words, if a sword is the ego, then the scabbard is the causal body. And when the causal body is destroyed, then just the sword is available. That's the true ego. So that's why I said two phases. The first phase is the ego on the higher mental plane, and that has a will which is about, let me express the virtues that I have accumulated. The will to express virtue in the world. That's the ego expression. But now, when you get the causal body is destroyed or the antikarana is in process of being built, now what does the triad express? It's not personal anymore. It's not individual anymore. It's all about expressing the plan. It's still planetary because it's still in the world of the AUM. It's not in the world of the A or the AU or the world of the O. It's in the world of the AUM. And you know, if I can describe that, this is the world of the AUM right here, the spiritual triad. And this is the plane of the AUM, which is Brahma. Okay.
What is the meaning of causal in this respect?
It's causal of the structure of the personality in the three lower worlds. It defines the way of creating, limiting, encouraging the personal expression of the monad. It selects the ray, or through it, the ray is selected by the solar angel. The virtues that are going to be displayed in the personality are selected. So it is the cause of much of how the personality appears, because the personality derives from the condition of the causal body. DK tells us, well, you know, the ego sounds its own note before incarnation and decides what it does have and what it doesn't have. And on the basis of what it has and has not, it shapes up a personality. It causes a personality of a certain kind to appear with certain energies, certain rays in the vehicles. It causes that type of appearance according to its vision of what is needed to round out this causal body. So it is the body that the solar angel draws upon to create a personality which will help the development of this vehicle. But the real world of causes, as we read the other day, is where? The real world of causes in terms of the cosmic physical plane. I mean, you know, every plane is causative to the plane lower than it, and even the etheric worlds, which Rupert Sheldrake has called the morphogenic fields, they are causative to the lower worlds. Like, you know, let's just say the embryo is suddenly growing in a certain way. Why is that? Because there is a model which is etheric, which is in a sense the effective cause of the shape taking in the lower worlds. Without that etheric shape, the physical organs and body would not take shape accordingly. So that is causal. But the ultimate causal or place of causality, and we just read it in our Shambhala discussion, didn't we? The ultimate, if I can just, my computer is protesting. It doesn't want me to look for Shambhala. Okay, but here it is. Shambhala, and we're talking about the first subplane. It therefore constitutes in a real sense the world of causes and of initiation, the logoic plane itself. It's more than the world of being. It's the world of impelling causes according to the divine idea. A very first-ray world. A sea of fire, but a sea of organized fire. So that's the causal realm. But let's just say that according to the nature of your causal body, so will be the kind of personality that the solar angel can arrange to be created. So that's how I understand causal. But probably there are other terms for it, and I don't know the meaning of Karana Sarira. Do you? It's the Hindu name for that. Karana. Oh yes, body of bliss. It's also called that too, because it's higher than any of the usual heaven worlds to which we go. And there's a great sense of unity within that causal body. So maybe the word causal is not even the best word for it, but it is the word we use. Okay. Now, so the monadic will is impinging upon the egoic will, which is at first the will to express the content of the causal body. How do I use the virtue I've accumulated to acquire still more virtue? That is the will of the first phase of the egoic body. And of course, all in line with the plan as much as possible. The second phase of the egoic will is much closer to shambhalic will because it is triadal will. How do I work within one of the phases of God, the planetary logos, working within his mind, his heart, or his will? How do I work there to express the divine plan, regardless of my individuality? And finally, the monadic will is how do I advance the purpose of the planetary logos in which I, as a monad, participate. All these different phases of will. So via the Antakarana, now I think we should begin to think of the Antakarana not only as something to be built, but as something to be used, don't you think? Something, in other words, we should look to the Antakarana as a line of descent for still higher forces. In other words, we should say something has been built here, something is being invoked, let us look for the evocation. What will come from the higher parts of my nature? It's like an antenna, you know? You have on the top of your roof, you want to pick up a signal. So you have the antenna there. This is like an antenna, the Antakarana is like an antenna to the energies of the higher worlds, even monadic energies, even monadic will. So before we invoke any of these kinds of things or call for them, we should do our visualization and feel connected so that along the line something more powerful can come. So down the Antakarana, there's no up or down, it's all mathematical, it's something different, but we have our symbols. This produces the higher correspondence to those qualities so glibly spoken, I love this, by the well-trained but dense esotericist. That should be enlarged. Well-trained but dense. Transmutation and transformation. The higher parts of transmutation mutation, and transformation. In other words, when the monadic will comes down the antikarana, then there emerges in our system transmutation and transformation. And I would say, from this point of view, transmutation is connected with the third initiation and transformation with the second. Usually, transmutation is connected with the first initiation and transformation with the second. Now, in your own mind, do you have a sense of what is the distinction between transmutation and transformation? And just, my only hint on this, or what helps me, is to realize that transmutation is connected with the third aspect of divinity and transformation with the second aspect of divinity. What do you think? Or do you mix these terms when you say, oh, I went through a real transformation, or I feel everything in my system is being transmuted, it's a big transformation, mixing the terms together? Or do we actually have a distinction? What do you think? It's not easy to distinguish between these. Any thought? So transmutation does, in fact, precede transformation. It does, yes. And later in chapter 10, he really he talks about the really higher expressions of these things. I will just sharing my own perspective on this. Transmutation improves the quality of matter. Transformation improves the quality and design of form. The matter is not form, is it? When magnetic energy responding to a certain pattern acts upon matter, form is created, right? Matter is substance, it's just stuff. Tiny forms, let us say, of a certain frequency. Transmutation tends to elevate the vibration of the matter in any system. It lifts the vibratory level of the matter in any whole or system. Like, we can use the ohm to a transmutative effect. And what happens when we use the ohm quite a bit in relation to our energy system? He tells us this, quite a bit all the time. Use the ohm and this will happen. What happens? Use the ohm, and why use the ohm? Why bother? What's happening? Transmutatively. Any ideas? Because I know you know this, but don't be hesitant. It's very easy, at least in the way it's expressed. He says, old, low matter, less suitable, is thrown out, and new matter of a higher quality is taken in. Another way of saying this is the frequency of the material constituents of any of your vehicles are raised to a higher pitch. So transmutation is about raising the vibratory pitch of the material units. But that's still not form, is it? That's just the matter that's in the forms. What if the forms are not shaped correctly? What if the patterns in our lower personality do not really reflect the archetypal patterns that they should reflect? What if the relationships between the material factors is not well designed? That's where transformation steps in. Relating to the form-building second aspect of divinity, we reshape the configurations which matter takes in our system through transformation. And then with transfiguration, we go into the abstract worlds beyond the normal type of pattern making. And instead of having patterns consisting of lower types of matter, we develop high energy patterns of higher types of matter, which are seen to be arupa patterns, patterns which are formless. They're not really formless. Nothing on the cosmic physical plane is formless. But they are more subtle forms or transfigured forms. They go beyond the normal types of forms in the lower worlds, and they much more closely resemble the archetypes. I could ask, and we could debate it for hours, what is the form of an idea? Because an idea can cause form, so in some way does it have an inherent form, an inherent energy pattern, which we cannot quite grasp, but it's there? What is the form of an idea? When Plato talked about archetypes, he called them the forms with a capital F. So they were the great energy relationships on the higher planes, even beyond the plane that we normally call the plane of ideas, or the Buddhic plane. All the cosmic ethers are planes of ideas. Well, anyway, here we are. We've been well trained over many years. We're a bit dense, but we're still undergoing transmutation and transformation when the monadic will, invoked through the Antakarana, descends into our consciousness and our energy system. And one of the best ways of doing this, I think, is to contemplate on the nature of being. He talks about that. We talked a little earlier, how essential being becomes so strong that it just blots out all the other perceptions. Have you ever sat down with yourself to think about being? Hamlet did, of course. I understand he's a local guy, over there at the castle. And he said, to be or not to be, that is the question. But of course, he was talking about a different thing. He was saying, shall I commit suicide or not? This is not exactly the philosophical pursuit of being. In other words, the question was, can I annihilate myself, or may I dream? Thinking to annihilate myself, I may enter a dream instead. That's a lower level of the consideration of being. But DK is training us. God is, time is, unity is. He's training us in the perception of being and in the identification with being. So I would suggest that if we want to get transmutation and transformation going in our lives, that contemplation about the presence, about what is being, about what is here, what is real, what is more than all of this form stuff, that this is a good way to do it. Does anybody feel that it would be an important part of your own internal curriculum to understand more about what being is? Or is it something too remote and seemingly not on the front burner of things to do? On my to-do list, contemplate being, number 1. Number 2, contemplate being, number 3, and so forth. But, that DK is actually leading us into this, if you realize that. He's talking in this language of the first ray about being. Anyway, we are in the process of transmutation. Our matter is improving. Our forms are improving. The result is the assimilation of the individual will and the egoic will into the purpose of the monad, which is the purpose, undeviating and unalterable, of the one in whom we live and have our being. So it's not like, oh, I've gotten rid of my individual will. Oh, I've gotten rid of the egoic will. No. What did he just say? Assimilation into the higher will. Look, when you have a subray, suppose you have let's say the personality ray is the subray of your soul, a subray of your soul. What do? Do you get rid of that subray, cut it off, and say, no, now I just have a soul ray? Or do we instead draw that personality ray right up into the soul ray and make that personality ray a true, effective sub-ray representation of the soul ray. Isn't that what we do? So he's saying the same thing about the will, isn't he? Continue to use your maybe transmuted individual will, continue to use your transformed egoic will, all in the service of the higher purpose. And what is that purpose? Whatever God's purpose is, God the planetary logos, and he doesn't change it, that's what the purpose of the monad is.
Would you say this corresponds to Mars being the hierarchical ruler in Sagittarius?
Would this correspond to Mars being the hierarchical ruler in Sagittarius? I hadn't thought of it that way, but you know, what idea is coming to you along that line?
Well, the individual will aligned with the spiritual will.
Individual will align with, he calls it the egoic will here, and there's another aspect, the spiritual will, then there's another aspect, the monadic will, and then of course the will of the planetary logos itself. I don't know if Mars and Sagittarius can contain all that, but I would say that it reorients the personality so that it aims for a higher assimilation. Because in a way, Mars is every one of the vehicles of the personality, and Mars is the entire personality as a whole, and Sagittarius is a higher orientation. So the personality sets its sights on the egoic will and merges with it. And then the egoic will sets its sights, Venus in front of the sun, on the monadic will and merges with that. The whole thing is about how do we find out what God the planetary logos is planning to do and why God the planetary logos is planning to do it. What is the purpose of this being? And you know, we could speculate and all the rest of it, but we could say to become a very fine base of the spine center for the solar logos, which means to spread kundalini everywhere in the solar system. Now, ours is one of the planets that's involved in the spreading of kundalini, you know, to be a very great stimulator in the solar system and to make it possible for the will of the solar logos to descend through all of his different chakras and vehicles, because that's what our own base of the spine center is doing.
And the reason is the ruler in Sagittarius esoterically and Mars hierarchically. There might be a connection there.
Okay, why Earth and Mars? I think there must be, you know, in a deeper way. When I think of Gemini, Sagittarius, and Earth together, I think one of the connections is about changing the animal into the angel. You know, that the hierarchical ruler of Earth is in Gemini is involved with transmuting the Earth so that it becomes more like Venus, solar angelic, and that the animal gets reoriented. The animal I look at as Mars in Sagittarius, the reorientation of the animal nature towards a more angelic part, nature. I also think of the changing of elementals into angels. Tuya emphasizes this all the time. There's a certain point where elementals get wings, so to speak. We, you know, she says, and I think she's right, that compared to the solar logos, we are like little elementals, we human beings. The fourth initiation comes along, and like a good pilot, we get our wings. We change into a more angelic type of being. So I think the relationship there between the angel and the animal, with Earth in the middle, and with Mars being the neighboring planet to reorient the animal nature, I think those ideas are related, but I would have to ponder it, you know. There is, of course, an astrological interpretation for all of this, you know, and so anyway, here's the thing. What is our planetary logos really doing? And are we part of the problem or part of the solution? Now, if we figure out what the divine plan is, we're part of the solution. But behind that plan is a purpose. And I read earlier about the purpose, didn't I? About the unseen, unknown, unheard purpose of Sanat Kumara, which lies at the heart of every esoteric school. Then there are 6 more purposes. The purpose behind revelation, and the purpose of creativity, and the purpose of pain, and on, according to the ray, the 7-fold purposes of Sanat Kumara. So when the monadic will hits, we get a sense of those purposes, and how we can align with the purpose and bring the purpose right into everyday life through a well-timed plan. And he says every disciple had better have a program in his own life, in her own life. Have a program, a planned program. Because that is what makes a disciple of you, to actually externalize something of the plan through your own plan, your own program. So do we have it? Of course we do have it. And could we do it still better somehow? And of course we could. All right. So the result of this transmutation and transformation, the lesser aspects of our will are assimilated into the monadic will, which is to carry out the purpose of Sanat Kumara. This is the field of the true burning. So, we start out in the morning with what's the burning ground, Have I been through a burning ground? Have I been through difficult purifications and relinquishments and sacrifices and all that? But that's not enough, is it, to define what the real burning ground is? We are aflame with the inner fire, electric fire even, in carrying out the will of the great Logos. That's when we become the burning ground itself. We're on fire with the logoic will and with the egoic will and the individual will serving that monadic logoic will. This is the burning bush or the burning tree of the life of biblical symbolism. This highest of all the fires, this deeply spiritual and hitherto seldom recognized burning ground, has its effects sum up for us in the next phrase or sentence of Rule 1. The clear, cold light shines forth, and cold it is. We're not going on, of course. It's been a hot day, but we need the clear, cold light here. And yet the heat evoked by the group love permits the warmth of energetic moving out. That's tomorrow's focus, sentence by sentence. So our question is, if we're burning, why are we burning? How are we burning? For what purpose are we burning? What is the burning doing within us? And I would say the kind of burning we're talking about from the monad is all about getting ourselves into shape so we can express the monadic will.
In the old days in Tibet, they used to have this contest. How many wet woolen carpets could you dry during one night?
From your own heat. How many wet woolen carpets could you dry per night from your own heat? Cold, wet woolen carpets. That would be an incentive, wouldn't it, to just get hot quickly and what do they call that? Tumo yoga? Tumo? Something like that? Milarepa, Milarepa had a teacher, Marpa, who had some students, and Marpa gave a particular type of yoga to each one of those students, depending on what he saw ahead for them as to the kind of spiritual life they would have to live. And he gave to Milarepa Tumo yoga, because he'd be spending a lot of time in dark, cold caves, which he would need to warm up by his own heat. And you also hear about melting the snow around you and doing all that. The inner powers of the human being are really incredible. But you can understand why we have to have a certain type of right human relations orientation before it's safe to start playing around with all that stuff. The story goes in Agni Yoga somewhere that the Buddha had some students who basically said, hey, teacher, let us do a miracle. and they wanted to just exercise their powers, but the Buddha let them do it, but the results were disastrous. They upset the balance of nature. Ships were sinking and lions were preying, and there were all kinds of messengers were being stopped in the road. In other words, discontinuities were being created all over, and so he said, okay, now you've had your miracle, now go fix it. Go bring help. Because this egoistic desire to produce a miracle through the exercise of power, let me do a miracle, has no real purpose behind it. And so we'll have to be very careful with the revelation of powers during the next few 100,000 years, that they all fit with something larger, some larger design than just our own desire to do a miracle. Although it's kind of funny, in the initiate books, during the parties, they say, oh, do a miracle for us, Master. And he would, As a matter of fact, it's said somewhere, I don't know if it's in the Agni Yoga books or Tibetan, but that in the past, the miracles used to be for the public, to convince them. But in the future, the miracles will be for the trained disciples, to teach them. This is a different thing. So he appeared on different sides of the room, he could.
Like that answer when he said he was asked to do one of the well-known tracks from the Spiritism, and he said, "Okay, we will not disturb the dead." He said,
We will not disturb the dead.
We will not do this. We will not disturb the dead.
Yeah, it's very, very. It's inspiring and a humorous book, and very wonderful teaching in it. But you get an idea about how the members of the hierarchy really can act like normal human beings and still have their high status. Okay, so we have we finished this part. Are there any thoughts that are coming to you? I may end today's work a little early because we have a discussion we have to have, which is not part of the webinar. Well, I might do that, but not just yet. Not just yet. I might, if you have any questions or thoughts on what we've covered here, we can look at that. But also, we can go back and finish off this business about the mysteries. A little bit of that. We can do that. At the end of this large introduction is a list of all the 9 initiations, all the words of power connected with them, and all the rays connected with them. And we can supply the astrological signs also connected with them. We can do that ourselves. And maybe we'll be able to get there. We'll see. This is only day 2. Okay, so this has not been a very long section, but we have covered it. And it's all been about the burning ground, monadic will, and becoming on fire with electric fire, which is basically meant to create us as a vehicle for the expression of divine purpose. Now, it seems like a very high thing, I think, for us, because sometimes, we're worried about much lesser things than these things. But he's telling us what lies ahead. So this focused, immovable will, this blinding conviction, sweeping all before it, it's all about power and how to bring purposeful power into our lives and stop being the well-trained, dense esotericist. Instead, be a well-trained, sensitive esotericist. Okay, let's go back just a little bit. About the mysteries, because he's been telling us about Masonry and the mysteries, and the coming mysteries, which are really going to lift humanity up. The mysteries are in reality the true source of revelation, and it can only be when the mind and the will to good are closely blended and conditioning human behavior that the extent of the coming revelation will be grasped, for only then can humanity be trusted with the secrets. So what's he saying? We've got plenty of mind now, don't we? But how much will to good do we have? Not so much. We hardly even know what it is. So in the future days, the will to good, which is the will to the archetype, and the mind, the will to express the divine pattern, will be blended together, and then the secrets can be given to us, and they may not be that difficult. There are many practical little things that one can do which are extremely powerful. And we knew these things in Atlantean days, and the knowledge of many of them the knowledge was withdrawn for wise reasons. So the secrets, they concern those capacities which enable the members of the hierarchy to work consciously with the energies of the planet and of the solar system and to control forces within the planet. I mastered energy, for I am energy itself. They will put the ordinary psychic powers, today so stupidly approached and so little understood, there's a masterful assessment, in their rightful place and guide man towards their helpful usage. He's saying there are a lot of psychic powers now. They're not well used. They're even stupidly used. And the mysteries will put them in their proper place. Okay. Some of us, are in the Masonic Lodge and so forth, or have our own rituals and so forth. This is just the beginning of this ritualistic revelation in the new mysteries that will actually make of us something that Manly Hall said, be very careful before you try it. Become a practical occultist. Practical occultism. See, right now, we are what you call speculative occultists. We're learning about it. Practical occultism, you make it happen. And that's a whole nother game, isn't it? Okay. The mysteries, he's really telling how beautiful the mysteries will be. The mysteries will restore color and music, as they essentially are, to the world. Ray 4 is coming in very strong, and Ray 7. And do it in such a manner that the creative art of today will be to this new creative art what a child's building of wooden blocks is to a great cathedral such as Durham or Milan. Now there's an analogy. Here's a kid with wooden blocks. Look, Dad, look, Mom, I built a house. Okay. And here's the cathedral in Milan. There is a difference. And he's looking ahead to sound and color in such a way that creative art holds out those kinds of extraordinary potentials which we cannot even conceive yet. The mysteries, when restored, will make real, in a sense incomprehensible to you at present, the nature of religion, the purpose of science, and the goal of education. They are not what you think today. You begin to think, you begin to feel like you're in the dark a little bit, right? When you listen to him talk. I remember Foster Bailey talked about the average disciple as lying in the mud with just the nose out of the mud, only that. Just enough to breathe, but really covered with mud. Okay. He had a way of saying things directly. So we should be filled with this sense of anticipation, right? Of what is coming. And we should be able to convey this to other people so that they become enthusiastic about the possibility. And of course, we have to demonstrate our own enthusiasm as well, don't we? Okay. The ground is being prepared at this time for this great restoration. And then he says, here's the failure. The churches and masonry are today before the judgment seat of humanity's critical mind, and the word has gone forth from that mass mind that both of them failed in their divinely assigned tasks. This is back in the 40s. They couldn't stop the attack of the Black Lodge for all of the value within them. They didn't have enough goodwill, enough power to unify. They couldn't stop this plutonic attack on humanity. It is realized everywhere that new life must be poured in and great changes wrought in the awareness and in the training of those who work through and in these two media of truth, and that is happening. Have any of you ever heard Bishop Tutu speak? Desmond Tutu from South Africa? He carries something. Amazing love, energy. You know, this is an initiate. This is no question about it. He's really friends with the Dalai Lama, you know. The two of them are kind of friends. Recently, South Africa wouldn't let in the Dalai Lama to celebrate Tutu's 80th birthday. Wouldn't let him in. Why? Money. Trading with China, you know. So it was not politic to offend the Chinese, who are a big trading partner here. See? So there's the third ray and the third aspect and the second aspect fighting with each other, you know. China and France, they both have that third ray personality. You know, I sometimes think the third ray personality, you know, you sell your mother for the right price. It's you know, it can be quite material and without heart.
France is trying to persuade Germany to pay their bills these days.
Oh, you mean France is trying to tell Germany to pay whose bills?
To pay the bills of all those who have too much debt, including France.
Oh. Well, don't you think that Germany might just resist that a little bit?
Yes. That's the battle going on.
You kind of wonder whether, you know, Germany's karma might not involve some of that help. I suppose people think back and they think maybe Germany owes them something, you know. But not Denmark, right? Denmark has no bills to pay, right? I mean, in other words, everything's under control, right? In the Scandinavian countries, to a degree, under control, I suppose. Yes, it's Gisela warns about the euro, you know, that Pluto is approaching the position of
Conjunction to both the Euro Sun and the European Union's Sun position at 10 degrees Capricorn, January 1st.
well, we know what a very pleasant planet Pluto is and how it gives such mild experiences. Well, you know, people have wondered, the death of the euro, the death of the European Union, it would really be too bad because it's a Master R project. United States of Europe, so to speak. And United States has similar problems with Pluto opposing the Jupiter and the Sun in Cancer and other things strong. So we are certainly living through the time in which old structures are being destroyed. And when it all falls apart, who's going to lead people into a better way? See, the great second-ray thought form about what reality is has got to be presented when people lose everything they've been hanging on to. That's one of our big jobs, you know. So anyway, they have failed. They have to be revitalized, and already changes in Masonry are occurring. Very good ones. I don't know about the church. Sometimes it's a mixed bag, isn't it? You know, a lot of the changes in the church, which were inaugurated, what was it, Vatican, what was it, under John the 23rd? The liberalization of the Catholic Church. There's been a lot of backtracking, hasn't there? And now we have these very, very conservative Catholic organizations, like, what's it called, Opus Dei? Very conservative, wanting to, you know, now the Mass should go back in Latin and not in the vernacular anymore, not in the language of the people. It's like falling back into the old pattern and emphasizing again ignorance again. The priests are here. They know Latin. The people are there. They don't know Latin. So it's disenfranchising the people. These changes have not yet been carried out, for it will take a new vision and a new approach to life experience, and this only the coming generation is capable of giving. I sometimes wonder what DK calls a generation. What is a generation of world servers? Is it 25 years, or is it a whole larger span? They and they alone can bring about the needed alterations and revitalization, but it can and will be done. And look, we've had 3 generations since this was written. So, you do want to begin to assess whether we've done the things that DK tells us we had to have done. Anyway, here's from the old commentary about what must be done. Very beautiful words. That which is a mystery shall no longer be so. That which has been veiled will now be revealed. That which has been withdrawn will emerge into the light, and all men shall see, and together they shall rejoice. The time will come when desolation has wrought its beneficent work, when all things have been destroyed, and men through suffering have sought to be impressed by that which they had discarded in the vain pursuit of that which was near at hand and easy of attainment. Possessed, it proved to be an agency of death, yet men sought life, not death. This is very beautiful, and it has to do with a whole change of spiritual values, doesn't it? It says, men went after the easy materialistic solution and discarded the real fundamental values, and they will again assert the real fundamental spiritual values. But it sounds like a lot will be destroyed and a lot will be taken away. What do you do? People are really holding on for dear life to the material that surrounds them. We're maybe not among them, but we even have our own materialistic side, obviously. We still have areas of our personality which is still clinging to that which is near at hand and easy of attainment. That this is the prediction coming from the old commentary, having to do with different phases of the life of the planetary logos, which have been foreseen since the beginning. The mysteries are emerging. The revelations are coming. The knowledge which was taken away in Atlantean days is going to be restored. And this means that man and the devas will again be able to cooperate together. A time of, you know the story, the garden stands revealed, in ordered beauty live its flowers and trees, the bees and insects on their winged flight. The murmur of the bees and insects on the winged flight is heard on every hand. The air is rich with perfume. The colors riot to the blue of heaven. You know this one. The wind of God, his breath divine, sweeps through the garden. Low lie the flowers. The trees are desolated or bent by the wind. Destruction of all beauty is followed by the rain. The sky is black. Ruin is seen. Then death. That's part 2. Then part 3. Later another garden, but the time seems far away. Call for a gardener. The gardener, the soul, responds. Call for the wind, the rain, the scorching sun. Call for the gardener, then let the work go on. Ever destruction goes before the rule of beauty. Ruin precedes the real. The garden and the gardener must awake. The work proceeds. You're familiar with that stanza? Because it's part of your esoteric psychology studies, right? What is that stanza? You know what it is. It's coming in under the law of what? Law of the soul? Which law? What's happened? Something's gotten destroyed, right? Something was, it got destroyed, it got rebuilt. Law of repulse, ray 1. The ray 1 law of repulse. That which has been withdrawn will emerge into the light. Later, another garden. That, the time when desolation has wrought its beneficent work. You have to lose everything to find it. Egoistic was the first garden. It's whatever the gardener wanted. And the colors were rioting to the blue of heaven. They were not in beautiful harmony at all. What is the fourth formula in Dina 2? The fourth formula for contemplation between initiations is a picture, and it's called the sun on the square. Do you remember that? The sun is on the square. And the colors are at first very rough and crude, but the sun on the square purifies them and makes them more pastel, more transparent, more translucent, and everything gets refined in this sun on the square. And thus it is in every one of these laws of repulse. The little ego creates a condition. The condition is a limitation. The limitation has to be destroyed. The soul speaks and destroys, and then the rebuilding of something that is much more spiritually useful. The law of repulse is wonderful to study. I've just done a series on the law of repulse that I've mailed you, a commentary on every one of those laws to try to bring them more firmly into our consciousness at a time when many people are going to lose a lot of things. Or don't you think so? In other words, do you think the economic problems of the world can be solved in the manner that we are approaching them? Or could there perhaps have to be a change of heart in certain sectors of humanity, maybe all sectors, in order for there to be a better Aquarian distribution? I think we're going to learn something about how to solve our economic problems that has a lot to do with our spiritual values. And some people in the political world emphasize certain spiritual values, but they are fanatic and crazy in other ways. So a lot of adjustments are in process at this time. I find this very beautiful prediction of what lies ahead. So ultimately, confidence is what is needed, and we have the confidence. We certainly have the teaching. We really have the teaching. So runs the old commentary when referring to the present cycle through which mankind is passing. The desolation, the loss, Neptune in Pisces. How many things will go underwater during that time? How much flow of tears will occur? The necessary cleansing before the first real steps towards the externalization of the hierarchy and the reappearance of the Christ can occur. And we are all participants in that. We are not just students of Master DK, learning more and more about him, which we do. We're not just that. We are more. We have to reach, with the great second-ray thought form, a lot of people, so that the sanity of this second-ray thought form can begin to take over instead of what we have now. Yeah, Eric. Thank you. But you know, it suddenly switched to 8 hours. But only because you volunteered. See what I'm saying? Yes, Eric volunteered, and therefore I switched to 8 hours. Yes, that's it. Thank you. Thank you. I was just testing you. Okay. Oh, appreciate that. Okay, now I'll tell you what. I think we're at a point where we can do a little work in just summing up. And then I'll probably end the webinar a little bit early for the electronic audience. And then we have a few things that we have to discuss. Now, there are fewer people here today than were here yesterday. What do we think about that? Well, there are more of us and fewer of them. Us and them. It gets hard. It gets hard to, continue along the way, but I will put in my plug for continuity here. First, let us do a little re-emphasis. Let's call it what struck me on day 2. Okay, so let's do as we ordinarily do, and what we're doing here is we're working with the law of fixation, which is the systemic law connected with the mental plane, trying to fix in our consciousness things that are of value so they are more permanent rather than just have a totally fluid situation. Oh yeah, I kind of studied that, can't remember a thing, but I'm sure it was valuable. So, excuse me, time for some colored water. In our discussion today, it was basically the burning ground. And it was the monad as the author, let's capitalize that, of the burning ground of which DK speaks. And it was not the burning ground of the mind or of world horror, but of the monad descending down the antakarana. That is the burning ground of which we have been speaking, and we talked a lot about what happens when the blazing light of the monad makes its impact upon the egoic will and the spiritual will. We talked a lot about the will in 3 types. With monadic, monadic will having to take into itself the 2 lower kinds of will. Okay, what else? What else? Anything that may have struck you today? Besides the heat, yes. Right. That pure fire burning. So burning is related to purification. There's 2 types of purification especially, right? By water and by fire, and water comes first, right? Have you seen the opera, The Magic Flute? Have you seen it? Because it's a Masonic opera, and it deals with the candidate for initiation, and toward the end, they go through the purification by water and by fire, playing Krishna's flute, interestingly enough, and able, therefore, to pass through those great tests, and they go through together. It's very progressive. It's not just a man, not just a woman. It's a man and a woman together passing through these tests of fire and water. Mozart was a pretty loyal Mason, and he wrote a lot of music for the Masonic Lodge. And those who were composing, maybe Schikaneder, the guy who wrote the The libretto, maybe it sounds like he was involved as well. So every once in a while in art, the mysteries do emerge. Okay, what else? What else? The four veils. The four veils. So let's look at them. Four veils of Maya. And they are impulsion, distortion, separation, and aspiration. There's still a lot of mystery concerning the veils. And DK says that we shouldn't separate them too particularly. But there are ways to think about how to not let onto the etheric planes the chaotic energies, the glamorous distorting energies, and the separative energies. As for the veil of aspiration, I think more needs to be discussed there. I kind of relate it to the idea of aspiration without action. So in other words, it doesn't really manifest. And that has to be changed into constructive action, I believe. What else? Okay, did you say thought forms? All forms. All forms are frozen light. The opposite of unfettered light. Of unfettered light. Now actually in Shambhala is said to be unfettered enlightenment, which means planetary omniscience. That is unfettered enlightenment with respect to the planet. Most of us in our consciousness have fairly fettered enlightenment. Most of us are fairly fettered in our enlightenment. In other words, we have very bound, circumscribed areas of knowledge. But in Shambhala, everything is known, and Shambhala is the sponsor of the four great universities in the world. So the Trans-Himalayan University, the Southern Indian University, the Fourth Root Race University, and the European, probably the Western World University. Would it be Europe? Would it be the United States? It's hard to say. But since certain European masters seem to be involved, all of them European masters, it could be Europe for the sixth root race. What else? Anything else?
The secret of the higher initiation lies in the trained use of the higher will.
The secrets of the higher initiation lies in the training of or trained use of the higher will. Oh, to spell. To type. Yes, and we talked about not letting in too much will energy, enough so that we can handle it. So it's like handling will energy wisely so that we are not destroyed. It would be sufficient just to be damaged. Okay. Well, you know, we are disciples, so he says, contact Shambhala too early, don't use it wisely, destruction awaits you. So we have to be very wise in the relationship. In other words, this way, wisdom is applied to the creating the right relationship between will and form. The wise handling of the form. Wise handling of the form. Okay. What else? Yes, go ahead, Martha. I'm sorry, I'm losing it. Okay. The solar logoic and planetary logoic initiations. and man. And goals and objectives. Goals and objectives. So the Solar Logos has for objective how many initiations? 9. And the planetary logos how many? Where is the planetary logos now? In those 7? 4th. Planetary logos is dealing with the 4th lesser and impending 2nd greater initiations. And the Solar Logos, this is speculation, dealing with the 4th lesser and impending 3rd greater. So one day we'll be able to put together that secondary series with the greater series. And we talked a lot about the Earth as the Earth as the base of spine center of the Solar Logos, and why the planetary logos of Earth had to make rapid progress if the Solar Logos was going to make rapid progress. Maybe not so much at the Solar Logos' 3rd cosmic initiation, but by the time the 4th cosmic comes, then, and the 5th, the Earth will have to be in good shape to help the planetary logos with the distribution of Kundalini in the right way. It's very interesting. Oh yeah, just certain things come to me, but you know, the monad is always creating triangles. This is how the energy is going to be distributed via triangles. And I was just thinking, well, here's the Earth with its first ray monad, and it has to arrange all these Kundalini triangles in the solar system in days to come, of course. And he also talks about the, what should we say, the great revelations which are coming. Oh, why don't I type? Which are coming and which are unimaginable by us. Tremendous, what did he call these, what lies ahead? Spiritual, what was the word in English? Enticements, meaning, come here, it's wonderful, see? So DK said, you know, well, I told you that the other day. He said, don't you think perhaps we have some things that are of greater interest to us than taking care of you? You know, basically, I paraphrase. But areas of interest which might just attract us a bit more than playing babysitter, you know. But this willingness to make sacrifices to take care of the little ones, well, humanity is just filled with little ones, of which we are really the little ones. 1st and 2nd degree initiates, the little ones. Okay. What else? Anything else? Okay. The Antakarana is the way into Shambhala and the way for Shambhala to reach the lower man. We talked a lot about today about the monad descending. And you know, whether we were ready for that type of drastic descent, which would not be comfortable and would turn us into a burning ground. So everybody has to figure that out for himself or herself. But probably the soul and the monad will nudge us towards a decision which will be favorable in their eyes. There comes a time when you just don't have a choice, you know, it seems, or the only choice is to make the right choice. And then, you know, Master Moria says the Black Lodge really helps with that because they surround you and the only way is up. So they're being used to promote the development of the individual. The solar logos, an interesting statement. The Black Lodge is not part of the plans of the planetary logos, but is gathered into the plans of the solar logos. In other words, the solar logos can use them to bring about its own plans. Anything else? It's a lot of concentration, I know. A lot of concentration. Did you say will is the burning ground? Monadic will. Monadic, let's see, let's put it this way. Here we go. Monadic, why don't I spell it right? Will creates the burning ground. And we talked about the magnifying glass and we talked about drying out. It sounds like an alcoholic program, you know. You got to dry out before you can burst into flame. I think this is interesting. You can be ignited. In other words, you have to be deglamorized before you are good combustible material. So if you're wet with glamour, it's not the time for the monadic will to operate. Other drying agents have to be applied. The mind under Saturn and Mercury is a good drying agent. You know, there come times when we have to be a little bit arid. A little, you know, if you're too wet, we have to get out of that phase of being too wet. We also cannot become too dry. And then the soul will help us not be too dry. Does anybody here feel especially wet or dry? Maybe as we get older, we tend to dry out a bit, you know. Could be. But that can be a good thing, actually, because you get a little more detached. Like, it was a good analogy you were using, Gisela. Drying out is like detachment. I think, you know, decay, reading decay, it tends to dry you out a bit. It tends to be very deglamorizing, you might say. He uses a lot of mercury and very fine formulations under Saturn. So it's a really mental discipline, isn't it? Maybe we're not used to using our mind over such an extended period of time as we have to do in these classes. You know, but we do have our coffee breaks and other forms of feeding the lunar vehicles so they don't rebel too violently against our mental intention to bring in the will of God right here at Humlegården. Okay, so. Okay, good. So is that enough? Is that enough on that? Because what I can do now is I can ask. I don't have as good a computer today to make the sound as good, because I found last night that I created a file of our daily procedures which was 15 gigabytes big. 15 gigs. We must have said an awful lot. Anyway, so this will produce a smaller file, this particular computer. And what I will do is I will kind of unplug this headphone, and I'll have to simply speak in this way, which is not the best. And then I won't carry this on long because I'd like to meet with the group about another matter for a few minutes. So, friends, you are out there, and if you, there seem to be various of us, maybe 13 present here. who are not on the staff. And if you have anything you might like to offer, or any comment you'd like to make, or question or thought, you can raise your hand and I will unmute you at this time. So is there anybody that would like to say something? This is your chance. Mostly the class proceeds right here with you as auditors, listeners, but this is your chance if you would like to offer a thought. I'm going up and down the group waiting for a hand to raise. Some may be asleep, you know. Andrew was very heroic last night. He was up till 2 o'clock listening to all this. Okay, here's Joe. She's in Minnesota. Joe, I hope we can hear you. You're unmuted. Can you speak?
Can you hear me?
Oh, my goodness. Wait a second. Now you're more audible. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Just thank you all. I did miss the part in what was the middle of our night.
The middle of what?
With the middle of our night here.
Oh, the middle of your night. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward to listening to the recording. I hope that it was functioning. About the 4 veils of Maya.
The 4 veils of Maya, yes.
And the forms being frozen light. I'm
Yes.
sorry that I missed that part of the discussion. That's very fascinating.
Those were simply ancillary aspects, I think. But now, wait a second. I've kind of lost which. Oh no, I've lost which one of our. Let's see. Okay, let's try this one. Okay, that's right. Okay, so the veils of Maya and the frozen light. Yes, it's kind of Kabbalistic in a way. So we talked about precipitated light as form. And we talked about the 4 veils of Maya, but that's a whole unit of discussion in itself. And when we get to Rule 10, which will, I think, be a little while, then that's when there's a specific focus on that. So then we will, get into that, but perhaps we'll be mentioning it along the way, and in the faculty groups we'll be mentioning those things too. So, okay, Joe, thank you for being with us. Is it late there now? No, it's not too bad. It's 7 in the morning, or how?
No, it's 11 a.m. here.
Okay, that's not too bad. Okay, good. Well, thank you for being with us on this, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, is there anybody else who would like to say something? Because of the nature of this computer, you may have to speak up more strongly than you normally would, because it's not as good a sound system as the one I was using yesterday. I have you, Johanna in Holland. Hi. Okay.
Hello, Michael.
Hello, Johanna. Just speak up nice and strong.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I have not to say so much, only that I have a very, very good day.
Good day.
Even it was hot. Yes, it was a very, very good day today for me. I have understand a lot more from the burning ground, and so I'm very happy with that. Thank you very much.
We should all enjoy our burning ground.
Yes.
Yes, enjoy our burning ground.
Okay.
Good. I'm glad that worked for you, and it's just the beginning of the study, of course. So thank you for being with us here. Thank you. Okay.
Until tomorrow.
Yes. Okay. See you tomorrow. Very good. You're very consistent. That's good. Very good. Okay. Would anybody else like to offer a thought on the subject? We have Celeste here. You're unmuted, Celeste. Go ahead.
Hi, Michael.
Hi,
Thank
Celeste.
you so much. Hi. I really got a lot out of the discussion of the different types of the will as it becomes higher as you go up to the monadic level.
Mm-hmm.
Very informative. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Celeste. That is, DK says that we know nothing about the will, but he's given us enough. He's given us enough to know a little bit about it. And I think the important thing there is that the different types of will grow out of different spheres of consciousness. So the higher types of will have an immense consciousness behind them. And that's why they will as they do. So yes, we have to unite the personal, individual will with the egoic will, with the monadic will, the real thing, the reflection, and the distortion. We have to unite them all. Okay, Celeste, thank you for being with us. Appreciate that. Okay. Are there any other thoughts that anybody would like to offer? You're welcome at this time. Okay, some may be elsewhere. You know, I see a lot of these yellow exclamation points, which means that it says the person is not attentive. Not attentive. I love it. Well, maybe some of us have been not attentive also. You know, one fades in and out of sleep as one must. And even I have sometimes been talking in my sleep just a little bit as well. But, you know, the one thing you learn from teaching for 30 years, or however long I've been teaching, is to talk in your sleep. It is very useful. Any other thoughts from anybody here in the electronic group? Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll do our best to get to you. Brett and I are working on it. We'll do our best to get audio and video record of the proceedings. Sometimes the video record is very good because it shows you the text at the same time that we're studying it, you see. So the visual element is there as well. Okay, well, friends, tomorrow the clear, cold light shines forth, and cold it is. And yet the heat evoked by the group love permits the warmth of energetic moving out. So this is all about clarity of perception, the result in the group of that clarity of perception, and the service using solar fire, which will be stimulated by this clear perception. This will happen tomorrow. We'll work on that, and we certainly will finish, you know, one rule somehow during this 5-day period. Okay, so why don't we close a tad earlier today than yesterday, just a little bit, with the mantram of the new group of world servers. And I will somehow find it. I know we all know it. May the power of the one. Oh, there it is. All right, there it is. Okay. Right. All right, friends. So we go. Is it going to rain out there? Oh. Thunder and lightning. Oh. I don't know if I dare leave these computers on, huh? We will. Yes, we're not in danger of drying out right now, are we? No. Okay. And we use the word we. May the power of the one life pour through the group of all true servers. May the love of the one soul characterize the lives of all who seek to aid the great ones. May we fulfill our part in the one work through self-forgetfulness, harmlessness, and right speech. Okay, then tomorrow at 7:45 here and 5:45 GMT, we will start on the third sentence of the Rule 1, and we will continue working in the introduction to the rest of the book, and hopefully before long we will hit that page where the 9 initiations are described. There are 3 words of power or clarification and the rays connected with them. Meanwhile, have a good evening, and everybody out there have a good, well, whatever it is for you. And we'll see you in the Danish morning tomorrow at 7:45 Central European Daylight Time. We'll see you then. Thank you for joining us. Appreciation to everybody, and I could easily, oh, Catherine. Hi, Catherine, did you want to say something? I see your hand now. Hello. Anyway, are you there? Are you there? Are you there? Well, anyway, Catherine, welcome to be here as well. All right. So for right now, I can unmute everybody, and if you want to just say goodbye, you can as a group.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, okay. Yes.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you, Andrew. And
Goodbye.
Love to all.
bye, everybody. Yes, it's
Oh.
nice to hear your voices. Very nice to hear your voices, and you're all just for a brief moment unmuted. Okay, we will talk to you tomorrow. I can't get everybody unmuted; it doesn't quite work. But anyway, we'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, see you
Bye,
tomorrow.
bye, bye, bye.
Bye. Bye, Michael.
Okay.
Amazing.